ถูกครับถูกครับถูกครับ
On YouTube. If you're watching on Sky, make sure to tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to join in the discussion today. You can also download the My Channel 7 app and take us along with you. Alternatively, you can listen to this program on Your Excellency, so one killer minute. Thank you very much for taking time out to talk with you. Make sure you do comment. It's always um, a pleasure to hear your take on what we discuss here on Talk Africa. Now, before we move on, um, just to let you know that if you're sharing, if you're commenting, also, right, make sure you leave your name because I know that some people have aliases on Facebook, on social media, for instance, right? So you leave your name so we do know who we're communicating with. Okay, now, some time ago, I had the opportunity to talk to His Excellency Wamkele Mene. He's the AFCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement Secretariat. Many have spoken about the importance of African unification to move away from the overly dependency on Europeans, and for Africa, countries in Africa to stand on their own two feet. And for this to happen, the African Union came up with this policy, the African Continental Free Trade Area, hoping all the countries in Africa could ratify this and begin trading among themselves. It has been suggested by the World Bank that it could become one of the biggest trading bloc in the entire world and position Africa a strong place within the international system or in the eyes of the international community. I've been to many events where likes of Britain, the US, and other European countries are really looking forward for the implementation of the AFCFTA, which has started, but more countries need to ratify this to make this a success. Let's take a quick listen to my interview with His Excellency Wam Kinemene. Your Excellency Wamkele, thank you very much for taking time out to talk to us. Now, we've heard so much about the AFCFTA, and it's a pleasure to have you here to actually explain things to us. Because prior to you coming on air, I did mention that we've been following the progress of the AFCFTA since its commencement. When you speak to people in the community, they're still not sure about the AFCFTA. So if I may ask, if you could explain what the AFCFTA is and its purpose.
First, thank you for inviting me. The AFCFTA is about two things: integrating our market, industrializing our continent. We have a market of 1.3 billion people that is potentially globally competitive, just like India, just like China. However, we all know we have been fragmented for many, many decades. We have economies that are individually very, very small. We have lack of competitiveness, whether it comes to trade or investment, because we have been approaching competitiveness individually as each country. And of course, there's not a single country in Africa that can, on its own, without the others, that can be globally competitive. And so our heads of states decided that let us consolidate on this large number, on this large population, and create one single market, and also consolidate our combined GDP to make sure that we are competitive as a continent. So what we've been doing in the last 2 years is to create the rules for that consolidation to happen, the underlying rules for a consolidated market economy, very much like what the European Union did about 70 years ago. So we have started on that journey. Of course, we are late in the game. I think everybody knows that. It's 65 years later, almost 70 years later, that we are in this starting this journey. But I think that the political will is there, and certainly the commitment is there for those countries that have ratified the agreement.
And I know that the AFCFTA is part of the African Union Agenda 2063.
Yes.
So it's one of its main policies. And I think probably one of the most important ones. You've spoken about the trade aspect or the integration aspect. Some may argue we already have regional blocks. You have ECOWAS, you have SADC. Why the AFCFTA?
Well, the regional economic communities are focusing on intra-regional economic activity, so intra-regional trade or intra-regional investment. Today, if you are in ECOWAS, you want to trade with somebody in East Africa, you are, as a person from ECOWAS, you are as competitive as a person from the United States or the United Kingdom or China. You have no preference into the market of the East African community, and vice versa, and other regions as well. So what the AFCFTA is intended to do is to bring those regions together so that as a business person in the East African community, we have a preferential market access in West Africa and vice versa. So that you as an African will now receive better treatment in the region that you are trading in, not your own region, but the other region that you're trading in. You have preferential treatment, and that's how it should be. We have to grant one another the best treatment in trade and investment. So the regional economic communities will continue to exist. What we are doing is to bring the overarching, this overarching coherence that has not been there for the last 65 years, as I said. It is totally unacceptable that when it comes to trade in Africa, we treat others better than we treat African goods or services or exports. So that is going to stop with this new agreement.
So in a way, the AFCFTA will act like a magnet to help facilitate trade across
regions. Absolutely, we lay the basis, the magnet for cross-regional trade to happen, and that's really important. If we want to boost intra-Africa trade, we have to get our regions trading amongst themselves. For now, if you look at our trade patterns, each region is trading with Europe. Each region trades more with Europe than with another region of the African continent. And so this goes to the point that you made earlier about integrating the market on our continent. And again, this is where Europe was 70 years ago. Each country was trying to do its own thing, and it didn't work. And they decided that the best thing to do is for them to integrate their markets.
And how many countries have so far ratified the agreement?
We have 42 countries that have ratified the agreement, which, as I noted earlier in the week, that is the fastest ratification in the history of the African Union. In less than 3 years, we've seen these countries ratify the agreement. Only one country has not signed. Those countries that have not yet ratified have not said we are not interested. They have said we have to go through our domestic legal processes for ratifying international instruments. So I'm very, very positive that by the end of the year, we will start to see the results that we want to see.
I mean, what has been some of the challenges? Because one can only assume that must be very difficult when you look at some countries, especially looking at their GDPs, as opposed to other countries which are more industrialized.
The first big challenge was, of course, this project started in the middle of a pandemic. So to make the case for open trade in Africa, when 42 countries at that time were either in a full or partial lockdown and borders were closed, it's incredibly difficult to make that the case for an integrated market with open borders in the middle of an unprecedented pandemic. So that was the first challenge. The ongoing challenge is there are countries, the continent has differentials in levels of economic development. As you say, some countries have a GDP per capita of $110, others much, much higher than that. So countries whose economies are relatively small have reason to be concerned that they will not be taken over or swamped by the big economies of the continent. And so we had to build into the agreement safeguards that will prevent that, number one. Number two, we've had to create what we call special and differential treatment for those countries. So, for example, if we want to reduce tariffs, we say that tariffs must be reduced in 10 years. Countries whose economies are smaller will get 15 years instead of 10 years. So we've found legal safeguards, and we've also found practical tools for giving those countries the flexibility that they require in order to adjust to implementation of the AFCFTA.
Looking at the policy, I realized that the free movement of people was omitted.
Yes.
And I want to know why, because one would assume it will go hand in hand.
Absolutely. I agree entirely with you that free movement of persons is one of the drivers of trade. Yeah. However, the reality is that there are very strong sensitivities. Many countries continue to see movement of persons from an immigration point of view. It is going to take time before we transition away from that, which I think we should very, very quickly. We've seen from the experience, there are a handful of countries in Africa that have introduced visa on arrival, for example. They have not been swamped by people, from other parts of the African continent. Nigeria has visa on arrival. Rwanda has visa on arrival. Kenya has visa on arrival. There are other countries. We have also a protocol in the African Union, the Protocol on Movement of Natural Persons. It's been ratified by only 9 or 10 countries out of 55. So you can see that countries are very, very cautious. But I believe that when we have free movement of persons in Africa, just like we have in the European Union, that is when we will have a really, really strong driver and a strong booster of trade in Africa, starting, by the way, with my own country, South Africa. I think South Africa should consider a far more relaxed immigration regime that is tied to trade to enable economic activity to happen. I know there are other countries who also, just like South Africa, who do not have free movement of persons in their immigration law, or certainly who do not yet allow visa on arrival. So I'm a very, very strong supporter of free movement of persons. We've seen the benefits, as I said, here in Europe, of free movement of persons. The security questions will always be there. They will not go away. The terrorist questions will always be there. They will not go away. So I think we need to find innovative mechanisms for dealing with these legitimate security questions, legitimate questions about terrorists that may cross borders and take advantage of that. But I don't think that that should really prohibit us from moving forward with free movement of persons.
So that was the first part of my interview with His Excellency Wam Kilimene. In the second part, we spoke more about the AFCFTA, but one particular question that I did ask, as we just ended there, is about this whole debate about globalization, because essentially the AFCFTA is about globalization and the impact in African countries. Let's listen. So this is something that you think. I mean, look, we had it here with Brexit, and it was a major factor.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a perception that, you know, foreigners coming to your country are just coming to take over your jobs, your work. And we've seen that in some parts of the continent. Now, then, this is an issue that really needs to be addressed. Let's move on a bit, because in a sense, this is all about globalization.
Yes.
And there's been a debate about globalization, how it favors the super strong economies and it has a knock-on effect on less industrialized economies. And so I want to get your take on it, because especially here in Britain, the likes of Margaret Thatcher was really condemned for, you know, as I say, neoliberalism policies, you know, liberalization, privatization, and these are forces that drives, you know, the economy. So I want to know your take. How would you go about, or should I say, the African Union mitigating these risks?
Yeah, well, you know, the point you are raising goes to the heart of this debate that has been going on for the last 20, 25 years or so about the benefits of globalization and or lack thereof. And I do not believe that the African continent is outside of that debate. I think that we are equally affected by the forces of globalization. And second, I think that if a trade agreement is actually an instrument of globalization, and so we have to reflect. And we've been doing that. We have to reflect on how we can avoid exactly that uneven distribution of benefits. Earlier, we were talking about the differences in levels of economic development in Africa. And so if we bring in an instrument of globalization that will entrench those differentials, we're not going to succeed. We won't create jobs. We will create a trade agreement that benefits only the big countries, or create a trade agreement that creates jobs only for people in big countries. And we have to avoid that. That is why we have introduced a very, very specific, targeted programs for small, medium enterprises, for example, across countries, so that whether you are a small, medium enterprise in a big country in Africa or a small country, but you have access to finance, you have the advisory tools that you need to expand your market to other parts of the continent, and that you are able to also equally take advantage of this trade agreement, just like a big corporation, like MTN or Zenith Bank. I think that's really the key. If we can create opportunities that will make sure that we have even benefits are even across the board, in country and across country. That's, in my view, that's really how we deal with this issue of inclusivity and lack of benefits. And there are practical things that can be done to get us to that point. And we have introduced those programs for small, medium enterprises. We will have a protocol for women and youth in trade who are often left behind by trade agreements. So there are practical steps that can be taken to avoid that backlash that you mentioned.
I mean, you've just touched on women, youth. in trade, and seeing as the continent is a youthful population, it's interesting to see how the youth can be added to, you know, the space in which this policy is fulfilled.
We advised the African Union Assembly of Heads of States that by the year 2050, the youngest population in the world is projected to be in Africa, below the age of 25. Already, the population of Africa is a relatively young population compared to other parts of the world. And so if we exclude young people from such an important instrument, we would be doing so at our own peril as a continent. Today, we have young people in Kigali, in Rwanda, in Lagos, in Nigeria, who are at the cutting edge of technological advancements, innovation, digital platforms, e-commerce, and they are doing this without any support. They are doing this without any support, in the absence of any legal framework that is intended to ensure support for them. So the heads of states, and I have to say credit to them, we did not have to convince them. They said, yes, we do need to take affirmative action for young people and for women entrepreneurs who previously have not seen benefits of trade agreements, and yet they are the drivers of Africa's economy. So I'm very, very happy that we have started negotiating the instrument. We're looking at practical provisions that can be introduced in the instrument to make sure that young people and women-led small medium enterprises, to make sure that they are part of this. It's absolutely critical for inclusivity, and it is absolutely critical for the future of our continent.
And with regards to SMEs, I mean, I did a bit of research and looked at Nigeria in particular. So in the 70s, you know, textiles in Nigeria was booming until Nigeria opened its markets, and then it was flooded with second-hand goods from China and India. How would the AFCFTA make sure this doesn't happen with its members?
Well, we mentioned earlier what is outstanding in phase one. It's in the area of rules of origin.
Yeah.
And they are very critical to a country's industrialization, as you mentioned. So we have to negotiate rules of origin that will foster industrialization in Africa, so that we don't bring in products from other parts of the world and we say they are made in the AFCFTA, causing a distortion in the domestic market and people losing their jobs. So the regime of rules of origin that we've negotiated it requires a high percentage of value addition. So a country has to demonstrate that this has been created in the AFCFTA, that it has not been created in another country. That's how you industrialize. That's how China industrialized. That's how the EU industrialized. So we have to follow this path of industrialization, and rules of origin are key to a region or a country's industrialization. We are working with customs authorities to make sure that they understand the rules of origin that should be applied in accordance with the agreement, so that we can minimize these goods coming in from other parts of the world as if they are AFCFTA traded goods. We will never be able to eliminate transshipment, just like we can't eliminate criminal activity. It will always be there, but we have to make it very, very difficult for transshipment of goods to happen.
And finally, this is my final question on e-commerce. The pandemic really exposed the continent's over-reliance on, should I say, foreign entities.
Yeah.
So in terms of e-commerce, why hasn't this been addressed?
It is actually being addressed. In fact, we used to say that we will have a protocol on e-commerce business in Africa. We've now realized that actually e-commerce is a very narrow category. What we want to capture is digital trade. so that there we include electronic commerce, we include movement of data, we include data protection, we include payments, digital payments. We had the first session where we invited African thinkers in digital trade, as well as African SMEs and corporations, to say to them, we know that there's digital trade and e-commerce happening in Africa, and it's happening on its own. What is it that governments can do to provide a legal framework for that to happen? And the legal framework will encourage investment in infrastructure. We had a conversation with one of the big tech companies that said to us, if you have a regulatory framework, we will come in and invest in the infrastructure for digitization or digital trade. So the starting point is to establish the legal framework. So I'm very happy that we have seen, and no one disagrees on the importance of digital trade as a tool for development.
I know I said final question, but I must ask you this question. Mm-hmm. This is about the diaspora.
Yeah.
The role of the diasporas in the AFCFTA.
The diaspora has a very, very clear role. In fact, yesterday afternoon, we met with some members of the diaspora. If we want to talk about mobilizing investment in Africa, we have now established what we call the AFCFTA Adjustment Fund, which will be intended for countries who will suffer revenue losses as they implement the agreement. And so this fund is intended to offset some of those losses. We had a very good conversation yesterday about how the diaspora can work with us to mobilize capital from around the world to ensure that this AFCFTA succeeds. That's the value of the diaspora. Also, of course, it's not immediately related to us, but there's also an issue of skills transfer and technology transfer that the diaspora has access to in the rest of the world. So certainly there is a role for the diaspora to play. And I must say that everywhere I go, whether it is in the UK or the US, the diaspora is very, very interested to make a contribution. So we will expect the diaspora to come back with capital. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for taking time out to talk to us.
Thank you very much.
Have deposited their instruments of AFCFTA ratification. Okay, so we're getting close. We need 54 countries, all countries, to come together. Now it's time for a quick break. When we come back, we're talking about illegal mining, the fight against galamsey in Ghana. Is it real or is it a farce? We'll be back right after this.
Leatherback helps you move your money securely from one country to another with ease. With over 20 currencies to choose from, including Indian rupee, Naira, Ghanaian cedi, and US dollar, with Leatherback you can move money anytime, anywhere. Simply sign up, verify your identity, and you're ready to add money to your account. Leatherback is licensed in 4 countries, and with full visibility of your cash flow via our dashboard, you're in control. One access, one platform, one world. Download the Leatherback app and let the journey begin.
I'll say 2,000, huh?
Whether you're looking for poundo in your crayfish stock, all-purpose seasoning, or any other ingredient, Tropical Salt has everything you need.
No. A strong young man. A hero.
Mommy's the real hero.
Tropical Salt, flavors of the world to your table.
Leatherback helps you move your money securely from one country to another with ease. With over 20 currencies to choose from, including Indian rupee, naira, Ghanaian cedi, and US dollar, with Leatherback, you can move money anytime, anywhere. Simply sign up, verify your identity, and you're ready to add money to your account. Leatherback is licensed in 4 countries, and with full visibility of your cash flow via our dashboard, you're in control. One access, one platform, one world. Download the Leatherback app.
I am so hungry. This aromatic food.
I'll take you, Grandpa.
200 gram plastic.
Whether you're looking for poundo in your crayfish stock, all-purpose seasoning, or any other ingredient, Tropical Salt has everything you need.
No. Baby, I'm a strong young man. A hero.
Mommy's a real hero.
Tropical Salt flavors of the world to your table.
Welcome back to the program. We are streaming live on Facebook, so do go onto Facebook and let's hear you. Let's hear your take on what we're discussing here on the show. Just to remind you, we're also streaming live on GN Radio, so you can listen to us. Go on to tune in and listen to the program. Take us along with you. Alternatively, you can download the My Channel 7 app and watch us live as well. So we've got you covered. Before I move on, this program will be repeated in Ghana, ATV Ghana on Friday. So tell a friend to tell a friend to tune in. Now let's move on. The issue of galamsey, which Ghanaians call it, also known as illegal mining, is a phenomenon that has been difficult for Ghanaians to deal with. Now, the president of Ghana tasked Mr. Frimpong Boateng, Professor Frimpong Boateng, who is the former environment minister. Okay, initially the report about this was about missing excavators, and also to look into that how this phenomenon can be resolved. In Mr. Frimpong's findings, he mentioned a few names. Government officials seem to be involved in this phenomenon. We've been made to believe that it is the foreigners, the Chinese, who are actually conducting these illegal practices on the soil of Ghana. Little did we know by these reports. I think it's worth noting that the alleged names in Mr. Frimpong's findings have also denied any involvement in illegal mining. Now, to help us to discuss this issue, we have Solomon Latte, an astounding broadcaster here at GN, somebody who's very much into global politics as well. And also, he's a Ghanaian. Solomon, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
So, I think the first question will be not so much about I'll come to the report in particular, but the fight against galamsey. This is what we're asking today. Is it real or is it a farce?
I think this whole issue about galamsey was it's one of the promises. It was one of the promises that the Kufuor government made during its campaign. You know, but I think that it was more of a kind of propaganda, if I'll put it, in order to be able to stalemate, you understand, the expectations of the critics. What do I mean by this? I mean, I feel that the Kufuor government have not lived up to expectations as far as the fight for galamsey is concerned. Why do I say that? Now, the interministerial committee for illegal mining that was set up in 2017, you know, stand where Professor Frimpong Boateng was the chair. Okay, now based on the findings, I've read the report. Now, when you read the report, you understand, the report details that it was the chief of staff that gave Frimpong Boateng, you understand, the directive to write the report. Now, this is in sharp contrast of what You understand? The promises that what the president gave. Now, so if the directive is coming from the chief of staff, then what kind of there's no seriousness attached to that. Now, in the first place, there is a kind of infrastructure within the bureaucratic structure. Now, the report, when the report was submitted, now it's alleged that the report went to the secretary of the cabinet. Okay, now on another level, it says that it went to the chief of staff. Now, but the point is, if a issue so critical and serious like this should come to from the directive should come from a subordinate, then that means the government of the day is not very what serious about the criticality of what of the issue at hand.
Well, according to Professor Boateng, he actually handed this to the president. In other reports, he's saying that he's quoted as saying the president tasked him to do this, and he had to be brutally honest, even though some of his colleagues were implicit in this illegal.
But that's not what the report said. That's not technically what the report said. But I think that, I mean, all these hula baloo or these I would say the encomiums. I would say that these are political encomiums because it's a way of probably throwing off balance the critics. You understand that? I mean, the report. I mean, when you look at the report, you understand the findings of the report. You realize that now Frimpong Boateng made it quite categorically. There were certain political elements who tried as much to frustrate what his efforts. Do you understand? And this technically is not the first time we are hearing this. You understand? Because now, when Martin Amidu was made special prosecutor, you understand, who was taxed by the government. Now, first and foremost, the interesting, you understand, I would say, the interesting story or the irony about this is that first and foremost, Martin Amidu, you understand, Martin Amidu is not part of the incumbent government. He was brought from another government, you understand. Now, this in somewhat is to prove to the masses that it's not as if that the Akufo-Addo government, okay, is implicit or is prejudicial about its stance about collective responsibility. Now, obviously, collective responsibility works here, but not now. The first time that this concept of collective responsibility was introduced was during the Kufuor government. Kufuor was the first person to, but I don't want to, I don't want to sidetrack. I don't want to sidetrack. What I'm just saying is that this whole thing about this whole issue about Galamsey is a farce because when you look at the criticality of the issue, do you understand? When you look at the idealistic perspective, you understand, and match it, with the realistic aspects of what is on the ground, it's a far cry from what is happening. Now, as far back as 2008, according to records, according to the research by the migrant development and equality project report, we had about 50,000 miners, some Chinese miners in the country, you understand, who were mining. Now, the reports, there are evidences that show that.
Were they involved in illegal mining? I think we need to make something clear. You can get concession for small scale mining. However, small scale mining is not illegal. Of course, you can also get concessions for mining. That is not illegal. But there are some people who have concessions for small scale mining, but are actually doing commercial mining.
Yeah, but the point is that we have not found the bedrock of this challenge. Now, where the fulcrum of interest lies with what? Let's go back to the Frimpong Boateng's report, Professor Frimpong Boateng's report. There is a section where he made it quite obtrusive that the inspectorate, all right, the inspectorate of the Minerals Commission, all right, apparently has it's quite corrupt. You understand, and for the fact that it takes about 10 years before you can secure license. And that is the frustration that has pushed people into what? Into this menace of what? Of illegal mining. You understand? Illegal mining. Now, let's look at this from maybe another cardinal. Now, why do people go to illegal mining? Because though it's capital intensive, because still you use what? You use that. I mean, technically, when you talk about Galamsey, it's shallow mining. I mean, there are two types of mining: deep shaft mining and what? Shallow what? But the seriousness of this issue is that this mining is destroying riverbeds, it's destroying virgin forest, you understand, reserve forest, you understand, and also non-reclaimable lands. Okay, now that is one aspect. Now, two is the kind of chemicals that these miners use. Do you understand? That technically affects the livelihood of what? Of these people. Because now, for example, when these, I mean, if you know a little bit of geography, you realize the layers of what the earth are what we call the crust. Okay, we have the mantle and the core. All right. Now, so illegal mining technically takes place on the crust, while deep shaft mining takes, because it's more capital intensive, it's more work. Okay, but the point is, this part of that land, okay, is also it's cohabited by what water bodies where these people use that. Now we have a situation where people who, like, for example, in the rural areas where people, you understand, the indigenous rely on this, especially women, you understand, and other people and children will rely on these for daily livelihood. Now the point is that this will affects their daily living. And the problem that I am having is like the government of the day is very, very apathetic, nonchalant about the issue at hand.
But is it just an issue of the government of the day, or successive governments have failed to tackle this issue? Or is it the fact that some of these government officials are actually part of the problem? Hence, the fight against it is non-existent.
Now, the point is that we live in a situation that who polices is the policeman. That is the problem that not only Africa has, but it cuts across the political DNA of most African countries. You understand what I'm saying? Because the point is that most of these people, I mean, according to Frimpong Boate's, Professor Frimpong Boate, he mentioned certain people, key elements in the government, you understand, and probably people who are party faithfuls. You understand? I watched a footage of a day about some time ago when I think the Deputy Minister for Lands, or I stand for correction, where he was talking about, he went to Kumasi and he was talking about, the danger of illegal mining. And somebody from the crowd told him that, listen, when did you join the MPP? Or, you understand, do you know where we've come from? And so you realize that there are people who have interest in within the status quo, the macro structure of what we are discussing. So it makes it difficult because at the forefront you think that there is an honest fight against illegal mining. And yet, the perpetrators are right there within the parameters of of concern.
All right. Now, I think the next question is: will these names, or would this report actually be taken up by the Attorney General? Well, let's take a quick listen to this interview where the Attorney General was speaking to Joy News. Let's take a quick listen to what he had to say.
Such strategy sees of it, the OSP sees of it. If now I, as the Attorney General, were to review the report, what would you think? I'm sure it will lend itself to all kinds of suspicions. I think that really I can look at the report and review it, but if I do so, you, the same media, will say, oh, it's just a government's lawyer. Yes, so let independent people look at it. And indeed, I think that it's also important to note that the professor has been invited by the police. The police will build a docket out of the allegations made by the professor, and that docket will be ultimately handed to me. So I don't have to stampede the process by calling for a report and reviewing the findings and all. There are processes. The police is probing statement made by the professor in his report. We work closely with the police. The report will be given to us. We'll assess whether it is competent for prosecution or whether any dockets for prosecution can be brought up. So really, I've not removed myself from the process. I'm part of it. It's just due process that will have to be followed. I know the police have written to him. I know that he has also responded to the police. They are still going through the processes. I also understand that the OSP, as you are aware, has also written to him. I'm not sure of exactly when he is appearing before the OSP. And the child matter, I'm not too sure of who the complainants are, but I'm sure that I trust the Commission of Human Rights to do the proper thing.
Just listening to the Attorney General there, Solomon, you made mention of something about bureaucracy. I mean, when this report came out, because initially I think this report was given to the president about 2 years ago.
2001, March
Right,
2021.
2021. Right? And for some reason, it was leaked. And people are asking if Professor Boateng has been able to conduct this investigation, the findings, then what you need to do is get Attorney General involved. But it looks as if there's a process to where the professor has been called by the police. We speak to the police, then the police would then gather information and then take it to the Attorney General.
You see, it's very interesting when you find the kind of musical chairs that these politicians play with the destiny of countries, not only in Ghana but across board in Africa. Now, you talk about due process. Do you really think due process works? This Godfred Adami, who is the Attorney General, you were trying to say that, I mean, a serious issue. Technically, he's the state lawyer. If you allow me to say that, you know, who is the what? Now, you were saying that, I mean, first and foremost, the allegations that have been leveled against these people have been refuted by the supposed perpetrators. Okay, now, there was also the argument that Frimpong Boateng should have added a cover letter to the report. Do you understand? Now, looking at all these excesses, how relevant is it? Now, a report is a report. Do you understand? But the point is that they want to find a way around it so as to vindicate themselves. And this has been an issue with African politics for what? I mean, since independence, or even probably before independence. You understand what I'm saying? Because the point is, politicians always want to create some sort of anarchism, you understand? Create an artificial scenario of pandemonium, you understand? In other words, they create an infraction within the process, so that when there's an infraction within the process, they can be able to get whatever they want.
But I just want to ask you here, because if you listen to Godfred Yeboah Adamidi,
the
Attorney General,
yeah.
He's saying that he didn't want to jump into the case because the media will run with it. And secondly, Shraj looking into it, and of course the Office of the Special Prosecutor. But with Shraj and the Office of the Special Prosecutor, who has the mandate to actually prosecute?
Listen,
it's him.
Now, the point is that these guys always think that they can play on the intelligence of Ghanaians. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is not the first time. I mean, Martin Amidu, when he was under the office of the prosecutor, initially thought, it was going to be smooth, only to get into office that there were hyenas and lions, you know, and key players, you understand, in the game. It's a game. Do you understand? He is just trying to save his job. You understand? No, come on. I mean, it's not as if we're born yesterday. You understand? The president, Fuado, can just take his call and tell Martin Amidu that you understand? You have to relinquish your position. And of course, he's a smart guy. He doesn't want to He knows what he's benefiting over there. What due process are you talking about? Do you know? This is a very critical issue. You understand? That needs urgent attention. Now, Frimpong Boateng is no mean a person. Do you understand? I mean, this is a well-renowned as a heart surgeon. Do you understand? I mean, not only in Ghana did he make a name, right from Germany. Do you understand what I'm saying? A very educated person. Okay, now the point is that this is a 37-page report. Do you understand? 37-page report talking about the findings, talking about the recommendations. Now, what else again? What do you need? You understand? What else do you? I mean, we have select committees who, they take what sitting allowance, draw up policies that never sees the light of day. Nobody talks about that.
If this was not leaked, do you think that we would have even seen this report?
Listen, this is not the first time. Do you understand that these things are happening? You see, we live in a time and we live in a kind of a state. I would say that a failed state, you understand, where the structures, though the structures are there, well, the processes are short-circuited, so they can't function the way they function.
Are you calling Ghana a failed state?
Of course, Ghana is a failed state. Ghana is a failed state because the point is that if we cannot be able, you understand, to make the structures work, you understand, make the structures work, you understand. Not only in Ghana, most African countries are failed states.
Okay, all right. So let me just push you a bit further. You said Ghana is a failed state.
Of course.
I mean, what would you classify Nigeria as then?
Nigeria is also a failed state.
Somalia?
It's a failed state.
Sudan?
It's a failed state.
But then if you look at these countries, what proponents would you classify or would you look at to say that this is a failed state? Because Ghana, there's no war in Ghana.
First and foremost,
we've had successive change of governments.
First and foremost, now one thing we have to understand is that since 1989, you understand, where communism was put to rest. Okay, now it's quite obvious. We might agree or disagree that democracy has stood the test of time. Okay, now so you tell me that if countries who are they purport to practice democracy, rule by the people for the people, you understand? Okay, we have said that taking government by the barrel of the gun has not helped us. Military governments have not helped the course of what? Of transforming the fortunes, our political fortunes, and building, the status quo, the political status quo that we claim to yearn for. I mean, this has been a journey from 1957. We're in 2023, and still we cannot make a headway. Do you understand? We cannot, let's be objective to us. That is the problem with most Africans. We don't want to be very sincere to ourselves. That is one problem with Africans, that we don't want to be. It's like slavery. You understand what I'm saying? Before the coming of slavery, there was the trans-Saharan slavery. But nobody talks about that because of the fact that we know that we are guilty. You understand? The problem with most why I say the African countries or these countries are failed states, because we say we are practicing democracy. Now tell me, if somebody, Paul Biya, for example, from Cameroon, has been in power since 1980, you understand? And consecutively, their elections, the constitutions has stipulated terms of office. Do you understand? Now, already, that means the separation of power.
I understand. I get your point, right?
If the ideological,
but to draw Ghana in as a failed state is my question.
Of course, it's a failed state. I don't need rocket science to tell you that it's a failed state. You understand? There shouldn't be there shouldn't be just wars to know that a country is a failed state. Do you understand? Now, if you have an economic situation where the economy is hemorrhaging, do you understand? There is. Technically, the government of the day don't seem to have an action plan for the government for running the state. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, if you have a president who says that we know that we have money in the country, but we are suffering. That means the person in question. I don't have any personal qualms with any political party. But the truth of the matter is that we have become oblivious of the national agenda.
I asked you that question, Solomon, because you said Ghana is a failed state, and if you look at the international community, Ghana is actually looked on as one of the best democracies across the continent of Africa. So to suggest that Ghana is a failed state is my issue that I'm trying to understand.
Of course, the point is that the international community will always want to align with those they want to align with. You understand? Based on what they will derive from they would derive from the country. So if they say that, let's look at the Al Jazeera report of the gold mafia. Yes. he was, I mean, Akufo-Addo was implicated, and what Ramaphosa was implicated, and some other were implicated. Now they came out and saying that they refuted. They were given an ultimatum for Al Jazeera to come out to, but. Has anything happened? You see, the truth of the matter is that we don't want to be realistic. We have this kind of idealistic, intuitive sentiments that we want to build a better Ghana, but there is no realistic, constructive methodology, or approach.
We have to revisit this debate, Solomon. Thank you very much for coming in.
It's my pleasure
to talk to you.
It's a pleasure.
Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the program. Keep the conversation going on our Facebook page. We're done for another day. All being well, we'll see you same place, same time next week. Until then, it's goodbye from us.
Talk public. Talk public. I am so hungry. This around you.
Thank you, Grandpa.
Whether you're looking for poundo in your crayfish stock, all-purpose seasoning, or any other ingredients, Tropical Salt has everything you need.
Hey, no. Baby, I'm just young. A strong young man. I'm strong.
Mommy's the real hero.
Tropical Salt.
Journey begin.
Of the world to your table.
Leatherback helps you move your money securely from one country to another with ease. With over 20 currencies to choose from, including Indian rupee, Naira, Ghanaian cedi, and US dollar, with Leatherback you can move money anytime, anywhere. Simply sign up, verify your identity, and you're ready to add money to your account. Leatherback is licensed in 4 countries, and with full visibility of your cash flow via our dashboard, you're in control. One access, one platform, one world. Download the Leatherback app and let the